Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Healers of the World podcast. Today's episode is a little bit different and quite special. I am going to be sharing a masterclass that I created 3 years ago with you today on the podcast. This is something that I have charged for in the past, but I have just felt that it is time to release this, and I really wanted to do it on this platform. And this masterclass is about the role of the feminine in our collective ascension. And it was created as a precursor to a course that is still running as one of my courses on my website and still being enjoyed by many of my clients. And the course is called The Way of the Feminine. But it really isn't a course that is aimed towards just females only or anyone wanting to initiate with the goddess. This course and this way of thinking, this exploration into the feminine, has actually got to do with soul alchemy. Because when we are awakening and incarnating more of ourselves and more of our souls into this dimension, we need a healthy and active feminine to do this, because the feminine is the energy that supports us with rebirth, with creation, with shadow work, with introspection, and most of all, with the unknown, with the mystery. And if we don't understand how this energy works, or this energy is very weak or unfamiliar or distorted, wounded within our psyche and our energetic makeup, our being, it can become very difficult to grow. So if you are finding yourself standing on a threshold, if you are finding yourself in that place where it's like, I thought awakening was going to be fun, but actually the more I am awakening and the more that I am learning to know about myself, the more that I'm finding that I actually don't know what I want anymore. I don't know who I am. If there is this persistent soul ache in your life, this calling for change, but you find yourself standing on the threshold, really struggling to take risk and make decisions in your life that would bring in mystery or the unknown, this course is for you. This masterclass, this episode today is for you. So please keep an open mind, because when I'm talking about the feminine, I'm really talking about soul alchemy. And if that excites any kind of exploration or curiosity as to why the feminine would be so closely paralleled with soul awakening, with ascension, then listen on, because there are going to be some jewels in the next hour for you. So, a little bit about myself. I am 45 years old, standing at the midlife crisis threshold in my own life. And although the relationship with the feminine started at a young age on our farm in the Eastern Cape, my own career started to align with more deeper aspects of the soul in my mid 20s. So I hail from South Africa, and I founded a business in South Africa called Faithful to Nature, which is an online organic and natural store here in South Africa. But the deeper story behind it is that I pioneered ethical retailing in South Africa and potentially even further afield. When I started this business, I noticed that there was a lot of confusion and greenwashing and lack of integrity when it came to the ethics of ingredient labeling. So, um, all my career, I actually think my deeper calling in life has really been around understanding glamour and illusion, and educating those that are called to listen around discernment and around impeccability when it comes to titling, when it comes to the embodiment of work. And so, although Faithful to Nature is a natural and organic store, the work was really around educating the community here in South Africa around what an organic or a natural label actually looks like. And to the best of my knowledge, Faithful to Nature was not only the first retailer in South Africa or Africa, but actually the first retailer on the globe that created a really strict procurement policy, ingredient policy, that was a promise to our customers by which we procured our ingredients. And what that did was it created a platform or shopping environment that our customers could really trust, because we were very clear around what we wouldn't or wouldn't stock. And it didn't matter how wonderfully exciting or how many titles a product gave itself, how well it was marketed. It really came down to the ingredients. And to be honest, that really is metaphorically how I work and how my career and the legacy that I've created has grown since then. But the reason why this is important to my introduction today is that it was during this time of deeply immersing myself in environmental consciousness that I started to see how the ecological and indigenous destruction happening on the planet was actually a crisis of consciousness. And so, fast forward to 2 decades of intensive spiritual initiation and instruction in my own life, and you found me, much to my own surprise as well, being guided by a sudden and deep calling from my heart to leave Faithful to Nature and to start deepening my own service offering around consciousness. And that led me to much further initiation. I worked with a mystery school, really understanding the occult and particularly Hermeticism and Kabbalah, and then jumped out of the frying pan again when my soul nudged me from the mystery school to leave that community and to write a book. And the book that I started writing was all to do with the workings of the soul. And again, there was further surprise when I realized that the book that wanted to be birthed wanted to really be based on the feminine and the masculine energetics that run us. And the deeper I explored the workings of the soul and this, the clearer it became to me in my exploration of the creative energies that run us and run the planet, that it would be very difficult to find authentic alignment, authentic a voice, and to bring in soul aligned manifestation in the way that we have the potential to do it without really exploring the feminine. Because, as all of you will be familiar with, we have gone through a massive cycle on the planet, and this is all explained in the course. We have gone through a massive cycle on the planet where we have been deep in the masculine energetics. And through design or through error, I like to think that it's through design, we've moved into an era of very toxic patriarchy. And this is all part of a greater design to explore who we are. And so it has been very well writing a book and around why the feminine is so instrumental to our ascension. But it left this pressing question of, but how does one actually balance the inner feminine and masculine energetics within us? How does one activate their inner feminine? And how can one create a container to support us to really embrace and work with the mystery, to really embrace and work with the unknown, to truly develop in a visceral way an understanding of that inner voice? And this all resulted in a comprehensive 8-module course that grounds this work. And in today's podcast, as a precursor to this course that is available on my website, we explore why the feminine is so key to our ascension and survival. And it is a transmission that invites in a lot of curiosity on why the feminine leads us into our ascension, why it is necessary to have an active and healthy feminine to incarnate more soul and to move through the soul initiations that each and every one of us are being guided into, especially as this time, because I believe, as you would have heard from previous episodes, that the whole planet is going through a rebirth, through a massive soul initiation. And the deeper aspects of this is around what I'm going to share today. So the feminine is a hot topic, and for good reason. And perhaps with all the spotlight on this elusive aspect of ourselves and our cosmology, words like enchanting, sexy, mysterious, magical may come to mind, especially with how the goddess gets portrayed. But if we care to ground all the hype, we may be asking ourselves what an embodied feminine in our lives actually looks like. So before we continue, I want to make it clear that when I talk about the feminine, I'm talking about 3 parts. I'm talking about the inner feminine as an aspect of a primordial creative energy. So, according to Hermetic law, all living things are powered by an inner feminine and an inner masculine energy. The second part that I refer to here when I talk about the feminine is the world soul, the anima mundi, the goddess of the world, the earth. I'm talking about the earth energy, matter, martyr, the mother. And the third aspect, I am talking about source. And I'm not talking about the source in an aspect of the goddess. I'm talking about the source as an androgynous, but the place from which we were all birthed. So it's neither masculine or feminine, but it is mother. It is something because the mother births. So there's the first part, which is the inner feminine. There's the second part, which is the world soul. And then there's the third part, which is source. So when I am talking about the feminine, I am definitely not talking about gender, because the crux of this work is actually around unity. And the end goal is inner union. And so, although today's class is about the inner feminine, I am not advocating in any way that this energy is superior, or nor am I advocating in any way that we deepen any victim complex we may have between this war of the masculine and the feminine on the planet. But after eons of an overly dominant patriarchal rulership, we are out of balance, and this has impacted our ability to grow, to manifest, and to embody wisdom. So, in just the simplest terms, our masculine rules our mind and our feminine rules our heart. And because we live in a time where the mind is so revered and there is so little instruction on following one's heart and developing one's intuition and inner knowing, we have a generation of humans who mostly look for leadership on the external. So let's look at the feminine, because the feminine rules our inner world. If you look at the feminine aspects of creation, this is why the feminine is always seen as the passive energy and why the masculine is seen as the active energy. Because the feminine rules the unknown. It's the deep, dark soil, the womb. And nothing is birthed through us into the world without the feminine spirit. She is the queen of anything that wishes to be created or manifested. The feminine is the void. She is the unseen subconscious, the space in between. The feminine energies is the relationship. So we have the masculine, which is the solar consciousness. It's the mind. It's the making sense of, the logic, the structure. But the feminine is the relationship, the connection, the relational living that happens between all beings. And this aspect within all of us, men and women, is the portal to our divinity. So, with an active and robust sacred feminine honored within, we can face change and transition and even crisis that much more easily. And this is why this is so pertinent at this time, because our metal is being tested in crisis. And I believe that this is going to become even more so the case moving forward, because just as we learn about who our community really is in crisis, so do we learn about who we really are. And crisis is like that purgatory fire that burns away all that is not true. And this is very much the zeitgeist, the energy of this time. So, with an inner feminine that is alive, we are also able to tap into the true aspects of ourselves, the internal parts that are uninfluenced by the programs of our society, our parents, our teachers. In other words, when we are able to connect and relate into the feminine aspects of our being, when we are able to embody a mature aspect of self, then we tap into the unlimited aspects of ourselves. And so I ask you, what is the relationship like with your feminine? What is the relationship like with the relational aspects of your being, the space in between? How are you in stillness? How are you in mystery? What is your relationship like with the mystery? Because ultimately, the feminine holds that part of us that is true, pure, and divine, but the parts of us that are unstructured and unformed, the parts of us that are sitting there in the potential but are not yet known. And I believe that the soul ache that most of us feel with more and more pressure, that feeling that no amount of money or success can fix, is a desire for us to embody more of our unique consciousness in our lives, a consciousness that is birthed from the feminine aspect. And our souls are pressing harder now than ever before. The problem is, the challenge, is that so many of us have become so attached to our personalities, the parts of us that are defined by external forces, that we actually don't know who we are. And that's why even in a room full of people, we can still be so lonely. And this, my friends, is a symptom of an undeveloped feminine. And the fact of the matter is that we cannot birth more soul consciousness into our lives without a healthy inner feminine working. And this is why primarily the survival of the entire human race depends on us finding a balance between the masculine and the feminine energetics that run us. And when I say the survival of the human race, those that know me and have started to tune into the teachings through the questions that I ask my guests, you will know that I have a strong calling, a strong insight to understanding that the survival of the human race portends the survival of the elementals, the elemental beings that sit on this planet, that their future is dependent on how much of our soul we can embody on this plane. And perhaps I'll do a deeper dive into that in future podcasts. You see, the feminine is not an energy that can be neatly boxed. And part of the difficulty in understanding and describing her is essentially the elusive energy, the veils that surround the feminine, as well as aeons of patriarchal oppression shutting her down, causing us to live in denial of her wisdom and power, the denial of the wisdom and power within each and every man and woman on this planet. And to describe her is to work in contrast to her nature, because the definition and categorization require a rational mind, and she is the space around, within, and between the rational mind. And so the only way to genuinely know the feminine is to feel her, to feel how she connects us to our souls. And the only way to feel is to embody, to come back into matter. And that's why all of the instruction I do, all of my courses, the bottom pillar is always around looking at how we can come back into our body. What is the trauma and the belief systems that sit there that make us afraid of coming back into this beautiful, elegant technology, this vessel, the oracle that the body is? Just think about it. No matter how far one digs back in our magical history, it is very difficult to find books on alchemy and magic written by women. Those that are amazing. We have Blavatsky, and we have Alice Bailey, and we have Dion Fortune. But most of the teachings and the initiations of the feminine have actually not been scribed. Instead, her teachings are something that we experience when we connect to our inner divinity, or when we are alone in the wild parts of our planet, the forest, the caves, the mountains. And so what I'm saying here is that we have libraries and libraries and libraries on instruction on ceremonial magic and aspects of the masculine in magic. But the feminine aspects of magic are felt. And this is why the feminine teachings generally sit in oral traditions that are passed on from teacher to student in person, when the instruction can very much be around embodiment and felt technology. And you see, this is the thing. What's so tricky about the inner feminine is that the inner feminine can be so undeveloped that even if someone gives us these teachings, if they are not developed or embodied within us, we miss them even when they stare us in the face. And I believe that this is why so much of the teachings of the feminine that we see on our platforms at the moment are still actually teaching a very maiden aspect of the feminine. They are still teaching an aspect of the femininity that relies on validation from the patriarchal, the external, and actually the feminine that's asking to be remembered, not birthed, but asking to be remembered at this time, to be embodied at this time, is a part of the feminine that embodies more of the crone. The part of the feminine that, excuse my language, gives less fucks, needs less external validation. The part of the feminine, the true feminine energies within us lead us out of ego illusion and out of glamoring and back to the soul. And this is where there's a lot of confusion on the feminine instruction. True embodied feminine instruction goes past glamour. It goes past fawning to the external. So if we consider the alchemy of the masculine energy being around the external and the mind, and the inner feminine being around the unconscious, undeveloped, the raw, primal potential. Every time we are trying to become something, to become worthy to the external, whether it be to people on the outside or to our personality, to the masks that we hold, we haven't actually tapped into the true feminine. The true feminine wants to take us to sovereignty. The true masculine does too. The true masculine wants to hold a container of sovereignty. And these energies that I am interested in working with and instructing, the outcome, the goal is sovereignty. And so the sacred feminine belongs to the inner workings of our soul. And she is the great paradox. On the one hand, nurturing, soft, compassionate, but on the other hand, fierce, unstructured, primal, chaotic. She is life itself, the primal creatrix, but she is also wildly destructive. Look at anything in the natural world. For there to be growth, there needs to be destruction. And when we move out of balance with the feminine, we become desperate to cling to comfort, and we slow down the forces of the feminine. The feminine is as comforting as she is terrifying. She is an abyss, an ocean of possibility, depth, and paradox that none can definitively explain. And connecting to the feminine can feel terrible and wonderful at the same time. The vastness of the feminine scares us all. In truth, the first time that I really connected into this energy, I wasn't too sure if I was connecting into the light or the dark. It was a much younger version of myself, but the vastness was terrifying. And what frightens us most about connecting into the feminine is the level of responsibility required for us to hold that energy. And this is what makes us turn our back on her time and time again. You see, the thing is that because the feminine energy is cyclical and destructive, so it's constantly taking that raw potential and wanting to bring it into creation for the beautiful masculine to craft something with us. When we go out of balance and we don't know this energy and we lean too much on the structure, the logic, the mind, right? Thereby taking the masculine out of balance as well. And we become incredibly afraid of change and of destruction. And this is where most humans sit in this day and age. And this is why this instruction of the feminine, how to embody it, becomes so important, because then we become so much more creative, so much more agile, so much less afraid of change. But at this point, I want to take a giant step backwards. Remember, I said I was going to be weaving a lot. So just stay with me, folks. To help us understand the feminine, we need to also understand the sacred masculine and the interplay between these two. And to do this, we need to go back to the story of creation. And the reason is that we often forgot, which has been intentional, the role of the mother consciousness that birthed the divine feminine and the divine masculine in our universe. Source has an archetypal mother energy that then birthed both the divine feminine and then the divine masculine as we know it. And this is one of the reasons why the divine feminine seems so paradoxical, because often we confuse and intermingle the energies of our divine mother and the divine feminine. The divine mother births the divine feminine, but the divine mother stands alone and is more than just the divine feminine. And it will make sense as I continue. In the beginning, there is source. So source energy is limitless. It is everything and nothing, everywhere and nowhere, eternal, divinely intelligent, the great mystery that is beyond definition. It is a level of consciousness that is beyond gender, but a birthing, holding consciousness, a level of consciousness that can create life, an archetypal mother energy, the womb from whence all came. In the beginning, Source was everywhere, and yet it experienced a deep longing to know and see itself, to manifest more significant potential. But there was only one way that Source could fulfill this great longing. It had to create a space where it was not, to be able to witness itself. And so it did this by withdrawing and contracting in and of itself to produce a point of reference in the form of a tiny vacuum. This moment required tremendous sacrifice, but Source was motivated by such a deep desire to experience and express, such an unstoppable longing and profound love, that it contracted into this vacuum. And it was at this moment that Source differentiated itself into the feminine and the masculine energies. This act of Source contracting into a vacuum created an empty space, a space that was utterly void, but yet the memory of Source remained in the space. And we call the essence of that space Spirit, also known as Holy Spirit, or the Shekinah, or the divine feminine essence. An essence created from and mimicking the mother from whence it came, but not the mother. A new primal creative essence. And now, because Source energy is infinite and there is nowhere it cannot be, the instant the vacuum was created, Source energy came pouring back right into the void, penetrating the void. This active energy that rushed in and filled the vessel in the same way that the masculine essence inserts into and impregnates the receptive feminine vessel was the birthing of the divine masculine essence. This action created a point of divine union and the spark that initiated the Big Bang, so to speak. The vessel exploded from the tremendous force of this event, and this momentous fragmentation created the individual sparks of godhood that gave rise to each of our souls, sparks of godhood from the womb of the great Mother Source. The divine feminine spirit in the cosmic womb incited the masculine to become active and to birth an outer image of the original self. In other words, it was the feminine principle, spirit, that used the energy of the masculine principle, raw neutral energy, to manifest a clone of the self, the son or the daughter. And this means that we are each daughters or sons of great Mother God. We are the third aspect of the Holy Trinity. We are completely and utterly divine, perfect at our very essence. And in the mystical story above, we are the son or daughter created by the feminine and masculine principles, all held in the cosmic embrace of the Great One, the great mystery, the great source, the great Mother. As above, so below. So we see the story of creation being played out in the birth of our planet and in each of our human lives. For instance, the womb of any mother on the planet is the vessel that uses the spirit of the feminine and the raw energy of the masculine to create and birth her children. We also see this template all around us. Consider how Mother Earth holds life created by the union between the masculine solar and the lunar feminine energies. From this creation story, we can see, for example, how the feminine is the inspired and creative spirit that shapes the manifestation of what is to be birthed. The feminine spirit holds the potential of anything that can be birthed, while the masculine principle is the craftsman of everything we choose to experience. It manifests the desires of the feminine into form on the outer plane. As an example, we're just speaking metaphorically about everything, but as an example, we have all the potential that sits in the undergrowth, in the fertile soil, all the seeds of what can be sprouted. And then it's the sun's energy that directs that up and allows it to come into life, into being. It is the desire of spirit, the sacred feminine, found in the primordial womb, that gives authority to the outer self, the sacred masculine, to decide what is to be manifested. Can you see how the healthier these two components are, the more aligned our choices and our actions in our lives are? The masculine and the feminine are not separate. They are part of a continuum. And the more that they can dance and they can interplay, the healthier our manifestation is. So the more that we can listen to and connect with all the potential energy that comes into our lives and translate that through desire to the outer self to manifest and to craft that into being, the more activated and fulfilled we are as the human vessel. We can imagine the sacred feminine as the dream in our lives, writing the script, holding and nourishing those dreams, and providing the template or instructions to the outer masculine to bring those dreams to life. The feminine energy in this respect, and I don't mean it as a superior energy at all, but in this respect, the feminine energy is the leading energy. She is the quiet spirit of the world. The masculine essence can only create and manifest from the desires being birthed, expressed, and held in the womb space of the feminine essence. Right. So, what happens, folks, when this leading energy that holds the dream, that holds the script, that holds the inspiration is shut down and denied? What happens when all of that wisdom is denied? Then the creation and what we are birthing onto the planet reflects that. Our reality reflects that. And we find a state on the planet and in our people making choices on that planet that are myopic and only for short-term gain. Choices that are not inspired by love and connection and wholeness. Q, what are we seeing on the planet right now? We are seeing the results of the unbalanced masculine and feminine. And this is why any true instruction on the feminine or the masculine needs to come from individuals whose aim is union. The aim is not to persecute the masculine. The aim is not to feed the toxic villain and victimization of the masculine or the feminine, right? The game is a healthy dance between the two. But what we are seeing on the planet is the result of a generation of beings under the rule of an overly dominant patriarchal culture with a very repressed and wounded feminine. We are seeing the lack of wisdom of the feminine essence being expressed in the short-term gains of greed all around us. But we also have to be honest and to ask ourselves how this is playing out in our own lives, because as within, so without. Can we see the full potential of the wisdom we may be able to bring into our own lives and our choices with an active and healthy inner feminine working? It is the feminine that leads us to recognize the sacred in all things. This is simply just not the role of the masculine. The masculine's role is the role of that energy is to craft. With a healthy inner feminine, we are more able to access the sacred light that exists in all matter. We are more able to connect to the unseen around us, to be in our bodies and to be deeply rooted on earth, while still recognizing the sacred energy and relationships that run through all things, to see source energy in all things. And when this energy, this feminine energy, is denied or inactive or wounded within us or victimized, we struggle to see the sacred. We struggle to live in sacred energy. We struggle to live in beauty. Every conceivable thing of matter in our universe contains the imprint of Source, the Great Mother, and runs with the energetics of the feminine and the masculine. Matter translates to mother. This mother source energy is in everything. And that is why masculine and feminine is in everything. Everything we know, everything we are able to experience in the world comes about by the weaving of the divine feminine and masculine energies. And when these energies are out of balance, it becomes really challenging to access and see the divinity of Source, to see the sacred in all things. But there's even more. Let's look at how our vessel that is our soul, now fits into all of this. In bringing the great dream to life, Source's dream to life, the mother's dream to life, the mother also birthed a consciousness that could hold all of the memories and experiences as and when they were expressed. Remember, the primary desire of Source was to experience itself. And so it created a consciousness to hold our individual experiences and also our individual spiritual identities and missions. And this container, this consciousness, is our soul, and it is receptive. It receives stimulus and information that shares and shapes experience. And so I say this with the most profound reverence. The relationship with our soul, in essence, is feminine. The soul contains the raw neutral energy of the masculine principle, yes, but its flavor is feminine because the spirit of our soul is feminine. Without the masculine, this would all just be a dream. So I say it again, this is not about superiority. Neither energy is superior, but mastery can be found in understanding how they work from a mature and equanimous perspective. So let's look at the infinity loop here and how it symbolizes these two primal forces working through every aspect of manifestation, every aspect of our lives. All creative energy flows in the infinity loop. It is multidimensional with many streams flowing at once. But I am going to slow this process right down so that we can better observe and understand what's happening. The sacred feminine originates from our desires, beliefs, and dreams. She is doing the dreaming. She then receives the masculine outer essence so that it can be inspired by her desires and dreams to craft them into manifestation, right? So she receives the essence from one side of the infinity loop into her womb and then puts that back out into creation. And so the masculine and the feminine are doing this constant dance. The masculine essence activates this energy into form to be expressed on the outer plane so that the energy flows from the inner to the outer. The energy of the masculine provides the structure needed for the force of the feminine to become form. The masculine essence evaluates and then decides where and how to craft this form into manifestation. The experience of this manifestation then flows back into the loop, back to the feminine, the inner, where it was recorded as memory and potential in the subconscious. There, the subconscious material is fertilized and held by the feminine, and at the right time, returned to the outer masculine, who will decide what to bring to life. He will decide what components of this unstructured, primordial, subconscious energy it needs to craft with. Once these have been brought to life, these events precipitate further beliefs and desires, which flow back into the inner world of the feminine, where they are stored and fertilized once again, and then returned to the outer, to the masculine, to be expressed. The feminine arouses the masculine, who seeds her with the creation their mutual energies have chosen. And then she incubates and fertilizes that choice, nurturing it in her dark womb. And then, at the appropriate time, she will birth it back into the world for the masculine to craft and for Source to experience this beautiful dance of energy and to evolve. But a striking point needs to be understood from this. The unseen landscape of our inner world, folks, is where our divinity is seated. The feminine is our Holy Spirit. It is the most authentic part of ourselves, men and women. But all of our baggage, potential, and memories from all past and future creations are stored in the subconscious, in our inner darkness, to be used as creative material for the outer masculine to craft into form. And the only way for Source to experience itself, and thus ultimately ourselves to expand our understanding of ourselves and our divinity, was to split the consciousness into two. Our outer consciousness, our masculine positive energies, moved into duality. Our inner consciousness, the negative feminine energies, retained the truth, our divinity. The feminine holds our wisdom. She is the truth. She is the divine inspiration. So remember that duality is the vehicle. And for us to grow and to expand, what spirit, what source is asking for us is to be that bridge, to be the rainbow bridge between the masculine and the feminine, between matter and spirit, between time and eternity. But what happens when we go out of balance, particularly in the way that our current generation is, with this overly dominant patriarchal expression of reality, is that we become so frightened of the inner darkness. We become so frightened of the unknown and the mystery. But that darkness, that unknown, that mystery holds our potential. The way that we grow is to allow ourselves to experience the full spectrum of life, the known, but also the unknown, the happiness, but the sadness, the grief, but the absolute wonder of birthing new. And we become stunted in our limitation when these two energies are out of balance. The original translation of Sophia is wisdom. And just to make sure that the implication of this has really landed in today's episodes, one of the more universal names for the feminine and for the planet is Sophia. So when we stand in our authentic stream of consciousness, true as we are, dancing as the rainbow bridge between the masculine and the feminine, and we are from that place tapping into the infinite wisdom that desperately wants to flow through us, where we are not bypassing and stunting the feminine, the unknown, then we become wisdom embodied. We become the master alchemists in our lives, able to transmute any experience to our highest learning. Because the feminine is the part of us that is connected to our wisdom and soul power. And this is why the rise of the feminine is essential not only to the survival, but to the ascension that is taking place on the planet. If we want to become the master alchemists, the master magicians in our lives, we have to embody the dance between the masculine and the feminine. And that's why this course, which is all on soul alchemy, has a focus on the feminine. Not because the feminine is superior, but because the feminine has been denied and repressed for so long. It is the weaker energy within us and without us on the planet at the moment. And this is what makes those who don't have a natural power source want to subjugate and hide the feminine. In future podcast episodes, I will do more teachings on the forces that are trying to prevent us from remembering our truth, that are distorting this dance between the masculine and the feminine. There isn't time for that today, but I will go into this in the future. But the reason why the feminine has been so denied is because she is the leading energy, the power source, and there is no way to become complete or whole without this energy. There is no way to bring in more of our potential power when this energy is repressed. And over eons, we have been programmed to fear and avoid the darkness, the void, the womb space within us. In other words, the feminine. I'll say it again in another way. Over aeons, we have been programmed to fear the feminine. But this darkness is not evil. It is not dreadful or frightening as we have been programmed to believe. It is simply fertile darkness, unexpressed, unknown, unrealized potential. It is simply that which is infinite and vast and deep and mysterious and powerful, and that which has not yet been crafted into form. And ultimately, when we suppress our inner darkness, our feminine, we are suppressing our divinity. And this also reveals how essential our shadow work is in our ability to manifest and create lives that align with our most authentic intent. When we have a lot of neglected, rejected, and unhealed trauma that sits in our subconscious, it pollutes the energy that stimulates and directs the form of our lives. And while every human carries both feminine and masculine energies on the planet, when we operate as a collective, so when we look at it from the perspective of the collective, woman where the sacred feminine is most embodied, carry the leading energy. Not the superior energy, folks, the leading energy. So women birth life and light into the world. But there's a very important role of women on this planet when it comes to wisdom. The sacred masculine operates within the container that the sacred feminine sets. In other words, as a collective, the masculine can only create by the rules and beliefs that the feminine carries in the subconscious of the collective. This doesn't mean that women are in any way superior to men, but it does highlight women's responsibility for holding the potential of our ascension. The masculine helps to seed this potential, and without this energy, we would not be. But without an empowered feminine, which is the most active in women, standing in their power, we have little chance to heal. The feminine receives the raw neutral energy provided by the masculine, creates something with it in her womb or the void, and then puts it back into the world to the masculine, where it does what it needs to do. The feminine sets the tone for the energy in this world, be it kindness, resentment, blame, hope, or anger. When the feminine is denied and subjugated, there is no container with which to envision new realities safely. Then, the quiet strength, the spirit of the world is missing. So, do we as the collective understand the power of the feminine and by default the power of women? Do us humans really understand the necessity of honoring the feminine within and outside of us to create a world of peace from both the masculine and feminine energies? And given how the feminine has been denied and torn out of our historical and ancestral memory and raped from our lineages, is it any surprise that we find ourselves and our home in such a state of disrepair? The manifested world we experience is birthed by the quiet, vast strength of the feminine. However, it is crafted into being by the masculine. When the feminine rises, she does not rise to abuse or to pillage or to blame the masculine. Far from it. When a healthy feminine rises, she rises whole, and she does it to incite a healthy and whole masculine to create. And so please beware of feminine leadership that creates a pathology or a narrative that blames the masculine or blames men. Because for while the feminine energies on our planet have been deeply subjugated, a divine template of healthy masculine essence has also been hidden from us as a result. Because the masculine and the feminine are one, right? They dance like the yin and the yang in unity. When we repress and deny the one, we hurt the soul of the other. To create the dream of creation, for us to become multidimensional, to reach our potential as godlike beings embodied in matter, we require the masculine and feminine to meet and dance as lovers in their whole and pure forms. So, now that we understand the source and the role of these sacred energies, let's look a little bit at their characteristics. Male energy is direct and active and projects outward with decisiveness. It's got this giving nature, which is why masculine energy is called positive, because it's an outflowing energy. It is also naturally protective of its sacred mission, to protect the pure outpouring of the feminine, so that they can both experience this exquisite energy informed. On the other hand, feminine energy is receptive, passive, cyclical, which is also why it's known as having a negative energy flow, as it directs energy inwards to work with. It nurtures and assures, and it has a receiving nature. Masculine energy is more analytical, active, goal-oriented, logical, firm, loyal. It is also rational because it evaluates, discriminates, and decides what and how to manifest. And that is why it requires order, structure, and definition. Feminine energy is more equanimous, wise, intuitive, gentle, compassionate, and flexible. It is patient because it holds and fertilizes. The feminine is the void. It's the space where all potential is born. It is vast and all-knowing, yet it does not interfere. It is passive. There is a profound significance in that insight, for it is the feminine that helps us to recognize and feel the sacredness of everything in the universe when we drop into a place of stillness or being. From this place of loving non-interference, there the feminine supports us in seeing the spirit in all matter without judgment. All matter is divine. But without embodying our inner feminine, we will never have any hope of experiencing this. We can see clearly from our creation story why feminine energy is all about being, while masculine energy is about doing. One is not better than the other if there is balance. However, if we cannot learn to be, to sit with the silence, and transition powerfully through the unknown, through the void, when we wish to bring forth new creation or life, then our doing becomes very nearsighted and carries limited potential. When we access our inner feminine sacred energies, we tap into our inner knowing and our higher intuition. It is here that we find our way in the darkness. We learn to navigate from our inner worlds. From this place, we can access profound magnetism, the ability to attract what we want by knowing that everything exists and is already ours. I'll repeat it. This goes for the men and the women. Having an active, sacred feminine, a healthy reverence for this energy, makes us master manifestors. It really makes us so magnetic where we don't have to force and push to create in the world. We can magnetize what we want in the world. And this is why, as the divine feminine rises across the planet during this time that each of us chose to be incarnate, we will find ourselves as a collective, stripped of all the falsities to which our egos are currently clinging. And this process will better equip us to tap into our full potential and walk through the world with the faith, love, integrity, and awareness we have gained from our soul initiations. And this is why the dark night of the soul is so integral to us. It brings soul consciousness into our lives. This is why we have to go into the darkness, guys. The problem is, most of us don't know how to navigate the unknown. We have all grown up naturally in this overly dominant masculine culture. And this means that we have been taught over and over again to live and evaluate everything from our minds rather than from our hearts and our inner knowing. We have been taught that doing creates worth and that being is worthless. We have been taught that our emotions are weakness and that there is no power in honoring our feelings. We have been taught that our bodies are evil, that earth magic is low magic, that the wild is a place to be avoided and feared, and so on. So the moment soul tries to intervene in our lives by bringing in that change, either through very strong desires or even what I call a soul abduction, through sudden crisis, or incidents that incite chaos and therefore change, we, as the vessel, go into terror. The result is that we have become masterful at numbing the messages from our soul, at numbing deep desires that could bring chaos into our lives, yes, but also so much more potential, power, and beauty. And the consequence of this is that we do not reach our soul's potential in our lives because we keep avoiding the void, the darkness, the unknown, that place of potential. We give our power away again and again and again by seeking counsel on the outside, because not only do we struggle to hear the wise counsel and knowing within, but we find it terrifying to follow that inner voice, to follow the feminine, because we don't know how to surrender when there is not order, structure, and logic. And because our feminine is so undeveloped, we have also lost the ability to fully fertilize ideas, to sit into the silence, to really hear everything that needs to be heard before we try and manifest and act and do. And that's why our manifestation is so half-baked. Finally, that quiet feminine strength, that inner knowing, is what leads us to our authentic self. Not the self we have constructed in our minds of who we think the world needs us to be, but the parts of us that we truly are, the parts of us that can bring us everlasting joy, security. So the thing is, we clutch to an external, limited version of security, numbing the inner voice inside, when it's the inner voice inside that can bring us true security, to stand on our own 2 feet, knowing that we will never abandon ourselves, to stand on our own 2 feet, knowing that we are sovereign and we have everything we need within, to stand on our own 2 feet and to know and love who we are, to know our power, to not run from it, to not hide from it. And the thing is that when our feminine and masculine energies are both healthy and developed, that infinity loop of creation that I shared earlier works as it should, and then life becomes less about manifestation, and as I said, rather about magnetization. And in this place, we effortlessly magnetize true community, true tribe, true soul, aligned opportunities. In this place, we are actually so safe and secure. And this is what inspired me to create and build this course that this whole episode is a precursor to, is because I've seen, I've studied, and I've experienced, embodied how integral it is to have these feminine and masculine energies activated to their full potential. And so, if you're interested in finding out about this course on soul alchemy, the link is below, and it's on my website, Robyn with a Y, ROBYN on earth, all one word, robynonearth.com, and you can go to see more about the course. But we're not quite yet done. There's a little bit more I want to share. When we operate from a place of greater balance, the process of embodying soul's potential and wisdom is a smooth and graceful symphony of energies. The masculine creates by tuning into the divine feminine's wisdom, receiving that intuitive insight with trust and openness, and then the masculine acts on that knowledge with confidence and authority. And this is obviously a process that's happening within all of us. The feminine is not about forcing or working, it's about flow. And this is where the magic comes in. When we can flow with her cosmic tides, when we can embrace our divine feminine and release our need to constantly plan, project, rationalize, when we can drop into our hearts, and I really believe that this is where the planet is going, this idea that life needs to be so hard, that we need to work so hard for everything. I believe that this idea is going to be transmuted in the fires of change that are happening on the planet, because it's from being so disembodied and from leaning so heavily into the masculine that we have such a deep ingrained belief system in the collective that everything needs to be so hard all the time. We are living in a profoundly chaotic time. We are living in a time of deep change, upheaval, transmutation. And this energy of the feminine is so important to help us move through this transition. Because when we drop into this energy, when we drop into our hearts, and we allow the feminine mystery to awaken, it also awakens flow and faith within us. Faith in cycles, the wisdom of cycles. Faith that even in the darkness there is still light. Faith that even in pain a cycle is at work, and we will reach the light again. Faith in what we know but can't see. That deep intuition that guides us when we can feel things are not quite what they seem on the surface. Chaos is a feminine state. Think of how things are birthed into our world. Birth is primal, messy, and profoundly raw. The brightest stars are birthed from the most profound chaos, friends. The great mystery is held in the balance of this chaos. And from this state, the paradox of life and death and creation and destruction, because they are inseparable. Life is a continuous cycle of birth and death as we evolve towards our highest potential. And so as we become more embodied in the feminine, we can trust this. We can trust the importance of motion. And this really brings to mind the importance of the spiral to kind of land this, because obviously I'm not sitting in front of you with slides and you can't see me right now. But, you know, the spiral is one of the oldest symbols of human spirituality. It has been carved or painted onto rocks from thousands of years ago on every single continent and is the supreme symbol of the key law of life as we know it, motion. The spiral represents energy, motion. It represents the continuous cycle of birth, life, and death, and regeneration of life. And in many of the original portrayals of the spiral, we find the triple spiral. And the Trinity here represents the framework of life as we know it. It represents source, masculine and feminine, or mother, father, and child, maiden, mother, crone, spirit, mind, body. This triple spiral, the quintessence of this, is also the mystery, because the spiral reminds us that nothing in this world is designed to stagnate. The spiral reminds us of the void, that place where one door is closed but another has not yet opened, perhaps a space that you're standing in your life right now, certainly a space that the collective is preparing for. It's that space when we say yes to something, but we don't really know yet how it will work out. That space where we answer a call, a dream, but can only see the path ahead as far as the step that we have taken. In the arms of a healthy, active feminine, we overcome our fear of the unknown, and we allow the natural flow of motion to propel or send us to new heights. And as she rises, and as we rise to a new world and new potential, she is lovingly guiding us to embrace the unknown and embody the mystery. And so, folks, when we are plunged into darkness through pain, loss, illness, uncertainty, when the feminine is alive and well within us, we will always know that there is an aspect of ourselves that is simply visiting the birthing canal of renewal and creation. We are simply in the spiral. We are born anew as the cycle draws us closer to our essence with each turn. And this is why the feminine essence is vital to our evolution as a species. The world stops flourishing when we turn our back on the feminine essence and the natural movement of energy that exists within all nature. When we turn our back on the feminine, we turn our back on the dance between the masculine and the feminine. We turn our back on the dance of creation, the dance of the spiral. And this is precisely why an active feminine helps us to get unstuck. And if we don't know how to work with the less obvious and visible forces in our life, the unseen forces, we naturally start to resist change and motion. We begin to invite in energies of stagnation and we get stuck. But with a healthy and active feminine, we release the stagnancy and we start to evolve with the cycles of our lives as we were always designed to do. At the most basic level, all progression is born from a womb of darkness into the outer light of the world. Once in the world, we continue to develop by being reborn repeatedly as we evolve physically, mentally, and spiritually into our different ages and stages: child, maiden, mother, father, elder. Darkness or the absence of color is not evil. It is where the purest potential for all light resides. The unknown is not failure. The unknown is growth. With the divine feminine intact, we can get out of our minds and thus out of the way and allow life to evolve and for the ascension of our species to happen. With an active inner feminine, we learn to listen to our inner wisdom. The inner feminine is always attuned to the oneness and the wholeness of life. And in these times that we are standing in, where so much needs to be repaired in our relationships with one another, ourselves, the planet, and all the beings on the planet, the feminine will show us the way. The feminine was always designed to be our anchor as we experience the dream of Source. The feminine is like the rudder that connects us into the truth of who we are, as we experience the outer world that our inner desires have incited the masculine to craft. When we forget this and instead put all counsel and reverence on the seen, outer, illusionary world around us, we lose our way and we start to go in circles, drifting around the seas of our lives, blown by the wind of other people's desires and dreams. The feminine consciousness within all of us leads us to live and breathe with an inner knowing. to find that compass that will always support us in taking the highest path of joy. The sacred feminine energies within us support us to tune into the light inherent in all matter, since the feminine takes us inward. It is the feminine that brings us back to the sacredness of everything. So those who play with their tarot decks, I'm going to ask you the next time you do this, look closely at the major arcana number 6, the Lovers. You will notice that the woman has her gaze cast directly towards the angel, with even the cloud unable to block her connection to the higher plane, for she is aware of source. The man, however, is blinded by the cloud and looks to the woman in the card to connect with source. This subtle but powerful illustration of the tarot reveals a highly treasured occult secret. The inner feminine aspect of consciousness is the gate through which the inner masculine consciousness can apprehend the divine. So it is the feminine that guides us to ascension, and it is the rise of the feminine spirit, therefore, on which our collective survival depends. The solutions that we pray for and seek, those lie in the wisdom of the feminine. And it's not some outer force that is going to deliver those to us. We find this wisdom by turning our focus back to our inner world and nurturing that wisdom within. We are in a planetary crisis now, a choice point, if you will. The rising feminine energies within all of us are our salvation. To save ourselves and our home, we need to connect to the most authentic parts of ourselves, to go into the forgotten and denied aspects, to go into the immense amount of dark matter we all carry and to illuminate that matter. The crisis that we are facing on the planet is a crisis of spirit, and it is a crisis of the feminine. Ascension is not brought about by further disconnecting ourselves from matter, but instead by being so profoundly embodied in recognizing the spirit of all things in matter of our material world, that we can dissolve the veils right where we stand. We were born into a world of magic as magical creatures, and when our sacred feminine is intact, then our masculine thrives as well. When these two energies can dance as one, we reach our potential. And this is why it is such a privilege, it is such a gift, it is so imperative that those of us who want to become the master magicians of our lives, that want to become the elders that can co-create and steward this planet to her glory and her potential, that we get to know the inner workings of the feminine. So I've said it a few times on this episode. There is a course on my website. If you want to check it out, please go. It's really accessible. It's vast, the course. I have clients that are doing the course for the third time. There's too much in the course, which is wonderful. You can really see it as like the artist's way. It's a program that you can come back to again and again and again. And each time you do it, you will have capacity to go deeper and deeper and do more of the many practical exercises and applications that are contained within this course. But even if you're not interested in the course, I trust that this episode would have landed where it can and inspired in you the wonder of this energy that dances within you, this primal creative energy, the energy of the feminine. As you tune into her, so too do you tune into her beloved, the sacred masculine. So I'd love your feedback. If you've enjoyed this kind of teaching style, reach out to me. You can reach out to me through the website, or you can leave ratings so that I know that this has added value, and then I will share more teachings. Thanks for tuning in, folks, and wishing you just such a beautiful, inspired, and wonderful day ahead. So for those of you that want more information on the course, I'll just say it again for your ease. You can find out all the information on me and the course on my website, robynonearth.com. Robyn is spelled with a Y, ROBYN, on earth, all one word, .com, robynonearth.com. Thank you, folks. Take care.